If you were to describe the works of author Roald Dahl in a few words, which would you use? Whimsy, terror, wonder, fear, family, bullies. There is a strange but unforgettable blend of both comfort and cold within each of Dahl's works, where struggling young heroes must overcome both the most mundane hardships of everyday life, as well as the fantastical occurrences that change their worlds for both good and bad. It's the strange sea journey of James and the Giant Peach, the terrifying magic convention of the witches, the man-eating monsters of the BFG. But no combination of childhood wonder and fear is as famous as Dahl's 1964 classic, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. While written still early in his career, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory would come to define much of Roald Dahl's career. That's because it's a perennial bestseller that's still in the public consciousness year after year because of how many generations have read this book, as well as the many film adaptations that have brought this story of a young boy and the chocolate factory that may save his family into the mainstream. And each must grapple with a novel designed to both terrify and empower young readers around the world with a sort of twisted but intact morality play regarding the worst impulses of kids and the terrible parents who enable them. It's a story of temptation, innate goodness, and pure imagination told across 3 film adaptations and 1 classic novel that can never truly be touched. It's Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Over the course of a half-century career, Roald Dahl wrote dozens of books, hundreds of short stories, multiple books of poems, and even a few screenplays. But the claim to fame for this author will always be his children's novels. Dahl's first published children's book would be The Gremlins in 1943, written for the Walt Disney Company as a tie-in to an animated film that was never actually made. The novel, only 50 pages, draws on Dahl's experience as a fighter pilot for the Royal Air Force during World War II. From there, Dahl's growing success as an author was counterbalanced with a rather tragic and controversial personal life. When Dahl was only 4 years old, both his older sister and his father died from separate illnesses, leaving his mother and her children alone with a wealthy estate. This led to Dahl being sent to boarding schools where both violent punishments from teachers and bullying from fellow students would inform later stories like Matilda and the Witches. As an adult, Dahl had 5 children with wife Patricia Neal, but son Theo was badly hurt at 4 months old when his stroller was hit by a taxi, causing hydrocephalus that Dahl helped treat by co-creating the Wade-Dahl-Till valve, which helped thousands of children who suffered from fluid on the brain. Daughter Olivia died of measles at only 7 years old. Patricia suffered from 3 burst cerebral aneurysms while pregnant in 1965, leaving her on a long road to relearning how to walk and talk. In 1972, Dahl began an 11-year affair with Felicity Crossland that eventually led to his divorce and remarriage. And in the 80s, Dahl stoked massive controversy when he first began publicly criticizing the nation of Israel and its involvement in multiple wars, then began making anti-Semitic comments to the point of finally identifying himself as anti-Semitic before his death in 1990 at the age of 74. Oh boy. I am telling you all these things up front because while it's easy to want to separate an author from his kid-friendly books or to, quite dumbly, attempt to use the death of the author approach to pretend a creator's life doesn't matter when evaluating his works, I believe that Roald Dahl's dark, difficult, and painful personal life shaped the stories he made, for better and worse. Throughout the 40s and 50s, Dahl would publish various adult novels, short stories, and nonfiction, but it was the success of James and the Giant Peach in 1961 that set him on the course to be a celebrated children's author. Even that early on, the Dahl formula was set. Having a child as the protagonist, making most adults into scary, mean villains that get a terrible comeuppance, and spinning a kernel of childhood fantasy into an unpredictable story that ultimately asserts that children are correct, smart, and resourceful people who were right all along. Back to the beginning. The origins of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in particular lie all the way back in 1929, when, as a 13-year-old, Dahl was transferred to the private boarding school of Repton in South Derbyshire. But whether the teachers were good or bad, the students were happy or rotten, and the education helpful or not, what left the biggest impression on Dahl from this school was something that no other school had. Lots and lots of free chocolate. The reason was that the Cadbury Chocolate Company was using this school as a test audience for their new confections, sending samples to students for their feedback, and inundating the kids with all manner of sweet treats. It was then I realized that inside this great Cadbury's chocolate factory, there must be an inventing room, a secret place where fully grown men and women in white overalls spent all their time playing around with sticky boiling messes, sugar, and chalks, and mixing them up and trying to invent something new and fantastic, said Dahl, his childhood imagination running wild. I would rush out into the corridor, clutching my new invention and go bursting straight into the office of the great Mr. Cadbury himself. I used to lie in bed at night at that boarding school, dreaming up more and more fantastic successes that I had with Mr. Cadbury and his factory. The novel wouldn't come for another 3.5 decades, but the seeds were planted. And over the course of writing the book from 1960 through 1964, Dahl's son suffered that severe head injury, and his daughter unexpectedly passed from measles, each causing Dahl to temporarily stop writing, either out of his fight to save his children or the grief from his loss, with then-wife Patricia saying that the death of his daughter caused Dahl to all but lose his mind. Together, I think that the purity of childhood fantasy blending with devastating loss as a parent gives this novel the blend of harsh, sober reality and whirlwind, silly fantasy that has made it unendingly popular for generations. Charlie is just as much a young Dahl as it is his children. Wonka just as much the adult author as the father he wished he had. Published in 1964, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory follows young Charlie Bucket, who lives with his parents and 4 grandparents in an unnamed city that's also home to the world-famous Wonka's Chocolate Factory, run by the enigmatic and rarely seen Willy Wonka. But while Wonka's chocolate is beloved by Charlie, his friends, and children around the world, the Bucket family lives in extreme poverty. Their tiny house is barely strong enough to keep the cold winter out. The 4 grandparents have been bedridden for years. The family can barely even afford enough food and often skip meals for each other's sakes. And to make matters even worse, Charlie's father soon loses his job at the toothpaste factory. Charlie's only escape is the bar of Wonka chocolate his family saves up to buy him for his birthday once a year. But when Willy Wonka announces that he's hidden 5 golden tickets in Wonka bars distributed around the world that will give their finders a special tour of the factory, Charlie dreams of the chance to see the place he's fantasized about for years. Even more importantly, each winner will be given a lifetime supply of food from Wonka. And I think this is often skipped over in adaptations when people remember the book. Charlie isn't selfishly searching for some wish fulfillment, he's trying to save his family's lives, as they quite literally begin to starve, as is detailed in the aptly named chapter, The Family Begins to Starve. It's some very real danger within the book that contrasts hard against the fantasy we only find within the walls of the factory. And one by one, the tickets are found, making Charlie sadder and more quietly desperate until he finds the final one. A matter of a little luck and destiny mixed together. Soon, Charlie and his Grandpa Joe, much more likable in the book as a stalwart source of wisdom for Charlie, who's also reinvigorated by the grandson he loves, enter the chocolate factory alongside 4 other children and their parents to find out just what Willy Wonka has been up to for years, never knowing that only one will be left by the end, chosen to inherit the factory from its creator. Since its publication in 1964, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has sold more than 20 million copies and been translated into 55 different languages, solidifying it as a multi-generational, cross-cultural mega hit in children's literature. And it's not just the premise that captures the imagination. Dahl's book is sad, shocking, joyful, and satisfying for any age of reader. Coming in at only 155 pages with large type, and split up into 30 different chapters, Dahl's story absolutely whizzes by. It isn't until chapter 13 when Charlie and Joe arrive to enter the chocolate factory, but by then we're already so invested in Charlie and so intrigued by the mystery happening within Wonka's walls that whatever comes next has been masterfully set up. And even then, it feels as though we're only given a glimpse of the factory, flying past hundreds of other strange rooms that each contain a new adventure. And really, that's how to capture a kid's imagination. Give them everything they want, but make them realize that this story is as boundless as their own thoughts. It's beautiful. The prime function of the children's book writer is to write a book that is so absorbing, exciting, funny, fast, and beautiful that the child will fall in love with it, said Dahl. And that first love affair between the young child and the young book will lead, hopefully, to other loves for other books. And when that happens, the battle is probably won. The child will have found a crock of gold. He will also have gained something that will help to carry him most marvelously through the tangles of his later years. Dahl also writes with a wonderfully quick wit, which he most often translates through Wonka. And one particular device he relies on is that, once we're inside the factory, almost all of the places we visit are described by Wonka himself. This subtly shows just how inconceivable all of Wonka's inventions are to the common man, as well as just how eager the inventor is to share his world with anyone who will listen. The waterfall is most important, Wonka went on. It mixes the chocolate. It churns it up. It pounds and beats it. It makes it light and frothy. No other factory in the world mixes its chocolate by waterfall, but it's the only way to do it properly. The only way. And do you like my trees? He cried, pointing with his stick. And my lovely bushes. Don't you think they look pretty? I told you I hated ugliness. And of course they are all eatable. All made of something different and delicious. And do you like my meadows? Do you like my grass and my buttercups? The grass you are standing on, my dear little ones, is made of a new kind of soft, minty sugar that I've just invented. I call it swudge. Try a blade. Please do. It's delectable. It's playful, it's bold, it makes you hungry, and it's a little slippery, quickly making you realize that the boundaries of reality don't apply to how Wonka makes chocolates, which makes the factory so much more exciting. Oh, and it illustrates how almost all of Wonka's sentences end in an exclamation mark to underline his massive, manic energy. I find the Willy Wonka of Dahl's novel to be so comically manic in almost every moment of his existence, and so hyper-fixated on displaying his inventions to his guests, that the character lacks any and all malice, unlike his portrayals on film by Gene Wilder and Johnny Depp. Yes, Wonka has an ulterior motive in bringing the children to his factory, but he's such a vibrating ball of energy that each bad kid falls to their doom on their own. However, it's the Oompa Loompas that not only act as a Greek chorus to the story, reflecting the larger ideas and moral issues, that not only serve as the dark side of Wonka as they rhyme about what terrible children and parents each character is after they've been disposed of, but also act as Dahl's self-insert across the story. It's obvious that Dahl had a lot of bones to pick with then-modern society, and the issues that he was really focused on inform the fatal flaws of each character. But these are writ even larger through the Oompa Loompas, who decry the flaws of every character carted out of the chocolate factory in rhyming verse. Augustus represents greed and gluttony. Violet's obsessions are her downfall. Veruca is shown to be on the level of pure trash along with her parents. And Mike TV's rhyme leads to the Oompa Loompas, and obviously Dahl, pleading with parents to throw away their televisions and replace them with books. These choruses are easily the darkest and most menacing parts of the novel, with each terrible child's fate up in the air until the very end. Their punishments serve as warnings to young readers who indulge in the same vices. "Roll Miss Beauregard into the boat," he said to them, "and take her along to the juicing room at once." "The juicing room?" cried Mrs. Beauregard. "What are they going to do to her there?" "Squeeze her," said Mr. Wonka. "We've got to squeeze the juice out of her immediately. After that, we'll just have to see how she comes out. But don't worry, my dear Mrs. Beauregard. We'll get her repaired if it's the last thing we do. I am sorry about it all. I really am." The structure of Chocolate Factory's second half is so obvious that it essentially forces the reader to consciously accept that this is now a morality tale, as, one by one, each terrible child and their awful parent are put in front of the exact temptation that relates to their great weakness, and falls for it, being eliminated from the tour. Augustus Gloop, obese and greedy, falls into the piping hot chocolate river when trying to drink it despite being told not to, which leads to him being sucked into a tube that squeezes him thin. The chewing gum obsessed and hyper-competitive Violet Beauregard snatches a still in testing 3-course meal gum that eventually turns her into a giant blueberry, rolled off to be drained like a highly nutritious cyst. Veruca Salt, incredibly spoiled and given anything she wants by her rich parents, is thrown into the garbage alongside them when she tries to take a nut-sorting squirrel for her own. A bad nut indeed. And the television-addicted Mike TV, what a coincidence, demands to be experimented on by Wonka's new chocolate-transmitting TV broadcast, which shrinks him down to miniature size, only to be regrown to massive height by a painful gum-stretching machine. They're all pretty dark fates for young kids whose terrible behavior is largely the byproduct of bad parents, which Dahl makes very clear when describing each. And the threat of death seems very real as each is punished in some way. In fact, most of them exit the story before we completely see what happens to them, leaving their fates up in the air for most of the book. Maybe they died. Oh well, here's another cool chocolate. But Dahl makes sure to include a moment where Charlie sees each as he floats off in the great glass elevator. Thankfully, to quote Flight of the Conchords,
"You didn't kill me with your dragon flames. I crawled to safety. But you did leave me very badly disfigured," laughed the boy.
The funny thing is that in Dahl's early drafts, which first saw Charlie turn into chocolate as the inciting incident, the cast of characters was way bigger, making the story longer and repeating the cycle way more, with even more punishments. But when discussing the legacy of Dahl's novel, I think it's important for us to discuss the author's original intent for the book and the ongoing censorship of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that's gone on for decades. While some of the changes made to the text in recent years have caused waves, changes to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory first began all the way back when Dahl first wrote the book. In 2017, Dahl's widow, Felicity Dahl, revealed in an interview that Charlie Bucket was originally written as a young black boy. But according to Dahl biographer Donald Sturrock, Dahl's agent pushed him to change that. As it stands, Charlie and the Bucket family don't really have any descriptions in the book outside of its illustrations, drawn over the years by Joseph Schindelman, Faith Jacques, Michael Foreman, and Quentin Blake. Remove those, and the perceptions shaped by the film adaptations, and Charlie can really be any ethnicity. But having a black protagonist would have made Charlie stand out even more amongst Dahl's characters. Having Charlie and the Buckets be poor and desperate can happen to anyone. And I think that the larger struggle of poverty, hunger, and clinging to hope amidst a cold and indifferent society can be understood by everyone, so long as they have empathy. What I find even more fascinating, and what caused much greater controversy, was that the Oompa Loompas in Dahl's first edition of the story were described as African pygmies, and drawn as such in the original illustrations. And before you start crying, wah wah wah, woke modern YouTuber, the NAACP all the way back in 1970 found offense in having the Oompa Loompas being African pygmies, and that Wonka's cross-continental abduction of them and putting them to work in his enormous, dangerous factory sealed away from the world was akin to slavery. 55 years ago. 55 years ago. And while Dahl stated that he never meant any racist harm from his depictions, he agreed with the NAACP, and he himself removed the African references, had the drawings changed, and reshaped the Oompa Loompas to be like the orange-skinned hippies that we see them as today. That's an instance of an author's book receiving due criticism and the creator making changes for the better himself. The same cannot be said of what happened decades later and long after Dahl passed away. In 2023, Puffin Books, the UK children's imprint of publisher Penguin Books, announced that it would publish new editions of all of Dahl's books with major changes suggested by sensitivity readers. These changes were focused on Dahl's depictions of sex, race, and character in his children's books, with Chocolate Factory in particular receiving more than 80 different edits in these new 2023 editions. Augustus Gloop being called fat? Out. Mike TV having toy guns? Gone. The Oompa Loompas being small? Nope. Words like crazy, queer, and mad were erased, all in the name of sensitivity and making sure no one was offended. Now, let me make this clear. When it comes to my own political and social beliefs, I am strongly leftist. But I think that this type of unauthorized, hand-wringing, self-important type of censorship and re-editing of a book from an author who's long gone and who has been cherished by generations, and a novel that we all understand pretty well, is really, really stupid, it's lame, it's unnecessary, and it's completely wrong-headed. If you want to put a little note at the beginning saying what depictions or issues might be present in the book and give a little context, sure, go ahead. But to alter something published decades ago just for extra sensitivity is the absolute worst type of approach to progressivism today. Let people read something that might not align with their sensibilities. Let them get offended if that happens. Help them learn about points of view and how what's accepted in media depictions has changed. Thankfully, there was an immediate backlash when this was announced. And while Puffin still published these edited editions, they also still printed the unedited versions alongside them. Of course, when you're talking about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you gotta talk about the adaptations, because these films are just as famous as the original novel and have come to shape our perceptions of this story and its characters. The first of these, and easily my favorite, is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, released in 1971 and directed by Mel Stuart, with a screenplay by Roald Dahl and David Seltzer. The funny thing about Willy Wonka is that the entire project only happened because it was originally designed to sell chocolate bars. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, duh, this movie makes me crazy hungry for chocolate. No, dummy, I mean the Quaker Oat Company bought the rights to the book and put up the entirety of the $3 million production cost so they could sell Willy Wonka candy off the back of this film's success. That's actually why the film's title has Wonka and not Charlie in it, for extra product name recognition. However, Dahl hated the movie, specifically how the studio had Seltzer rewrite a script, the casting of Gene Wilder as Wonka, and the decision to turn it into a full-blown musical. You know, some of the best things about this film. But I think that Willy Wonka is a fantastic movie, and still easily the best of the three adaptations. Yes, it shows its production limitations at times, but director Mel Stuart gives the story a lovely blend of whimsy and danger, which is exactly how a Dahl adaptation should be. As Wonka, Wilder brings a manic, deceitful energy, constantly thrilled to bring his guests further into his factory and happy to mess with their heads. He's also just a little scary. The tunnel scene has scarred generations of children, but extremely funny, charming, and heartwarming. By the end, much of the Wonka we've seen is an act to help determine who will be his heir, and as a result, Wilder's Wonka is much more human than the one in the book.
Don't forget what happened to the man who suddenly got everything he always wanted.
What happened?
He lived happily ever after.
And one major aspect of the film that I simply didn't get as a kid is that so much of it is a huge satire of the media, corporations, and the insane lengths that people will go to for fame and fortune. This isn't something that's in focus in Dahl's book, which stays on Charlie and the shortcomings of the other chosen children, but it's absolutely hilarious. Also, Grandpa Joe sucks. He comes off much more self-serving and rude here, including getting Charlie into trouble with fizzy lifting drinks, whereas in the book, Charlie is basically a saint. Still, it's wonderful more than half a century later, and while the film initially did poorly on release, and Quaker couldn't get their chocolate recipe right and scrapped their movie tie-in plans, it built and built its reputation over time until it became inextricable from the novel. That popularity is probably why there was ever a remake considered in the first place, but it did no favors for Tim Burton's 2005 adaptation, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Making another Chocolate Factory film took about 15 years because the Dahl estate, run by his second wife and one of his daughters, was incredibly protective of Dahl's works by this point, leading to a lot of different potential directors and multiple scripts before Burton was chosen and had John August write his adaptation. Now, there's a lot of Tim Burton movies that I love, and quite a few have Johnny Depp in them, but the thing is, almost all of them were made before the year 2000, and this movie was definitely made after. Burton's film is pretty faithful to the book, but it's also trying to go way bigger and crazier, with huge sets and tons of CGI used to make the Chocolate Factory into the most enormous, endlessly weird place of pure imagination you've ever seen, while still owing a lot to the original film. There's also the memorable decision made by Johnny Depp to have Wonka be inspired by Michael Jackson, who had so badly wanted to play Wonka for years that he made an entire soundtrack that was never released. It sort of makes sense. Here you have this wildly talented, super rich recluse whose entire career is built off of his imagination and talent, who hides away from the public and sort of sees himself as a child who never grew up. But I wouldn't want my kids to live with him. What's funny is that despite Burton complaining about how much Wilder's film diverged from the novel and how his would honor it properly, the entire third act of Burton's version is completely different. Instead, having Charlie reject Wonka's offer that would separate him from his family and going on to discover Willy's estrangement from his own domineering dentist father, explaining more of who he is and why he is that way. And I know what you're thinking. Why would anybody care about who Willy Wonka was before this story and what he did when he was young? Next, you're gonna tell me that they made a Wonka movie prequel starring a pretty great actor who was terribly miscast. 2023's Wonka, written by Simon Farnaby and Paul King and directed by King, the duo behind the first two Paddington movies, sees Timothée Chalamet as a young Willy Wonka, who arrives in town as a chocolatier ready to change the world, only for slumlords and the powerful chocolate Illuminati, Chocolati, to try to keep him down. And it's fine. Honestly, what I find most interesting is how the film is specifically tying into the Wilder version through its designs and style instead of doing its own thing or trying to be more like the book. It goes to show that even decades later and after other interpretations, it's the Wilder film that's still most closely associated with the story. And with the film a big hit, there might be sequels, meaning we can finally see the story of how this carefree young man eventually turned into a miserable recluse who abandoned all the poor people who became his friends in this movie in his desire to enslave an entire population. Maybe don't do that. There have also been 3 musical adaptations of Chocolate Factory and a Tom and Jerry cartoon version, and well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all that. Outside of adaptations, Dahl would go on to write a sequel, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator in 1972. The novel, the only sequel ever written by the author, continues directly on from the original and sees Charlie, Wonka, and the whole family accidentally go into space in the elevator, docking at the Space Hotel USA and encountering aggressive, man-eating aliens known as vermicious canids. Oh, of course, everyone could see this coming. Once the aliens are burned up in Earth's atmosphere, the book shifts into some sort of reckoning with age, death, and where we come from by de-aging Charlie's no-good lazy grandparents. It all sets up a third book, Charlie in the White House, a terrifying prospect no matter the administration, which Dahl only wrote 1 chapter of before dying from, I assume, how terrible of an idea this was. Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator has never been adapted into another medium and is largely ignored as it's insane, terrifying, and was a bad idea even back when it was written. Beyond that, the biggest real-world impact of Dahl's story is in the creation of an actual, honest-to-goodness Willy Wonka candy company. The brand was originally founded by Quaker Oats to tie into the first film, but after false starts and changing of hands, it ended up at Nestle in 1988, which made chocolates and candies under the company logo until 2017, when rights were sold to the Ferrero Group, which revived the Wonka candy line in 2023 to tie into the new film. And if you're a kid who grew up in one of the countries where Wonka candies were sold, you're probably very familiar with some of their most popular products. There was, of course, the classic Wonka bar, but Gobstoppers, Spree, Runts, and my own personal favorite and probably the most successful product from the line, Nerds, were all made for decades under the Wonka name. Do these candies live up to the wild and reality-breaking treats made up by Dahl's book? No, but I really loved them as a kid. Are they actually made by a group of indentured miniature servants from an undiscovered land inside of a magical factory that violates every OSHA rule? Who can really say? But when I was little, it was exciting to get my hands on a Wonka candy and feel, if just for a moment, that magic really did exist. And capturing the magic and imagination of childhood is what Roald Dahl always strove to do with his novels. It's why books like The Witches and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory are so loved, and why I really loved them when I was a kid. They helped me feel like my fears, my desires, my understanding of the world, and my place in it and my family were understood by another person and by a story that I really loved. The experience of reading Roald Dahl's works as a child is unforgettable, even decades later. For a young boy wishing he could make the people he loved happy and safe, and for an adult just wanting the best for the people he loves, Charlie's happy ending still speaks volumes. Charlie climbed onto the bed and tried to calm the 3 old people, who were still petrified with fear. "Please don't be frightened," he said. "It's quite safe, and we're going to the most wonderful place in the world." "Charlie's right," said Grandpa Joe. "Will there be anything to eat when we get there?" asked Grandma Josephine. "I'm starving. The whole family is starving." "Anything to eat?" cried Charlie, laughing. "Oh, you just wait and see." Thanks Thanks for watching today's video, and this is yet another video in December that is a massive change of focus. You may have noticed over the course of this past year that I've been focusing more and more on books in my videos, whether they are the standalone subject of a video, like my video on Stephen King's The Stand, or a major aspect of a larger look back at a film and franchise, like my videos on Dracula, Total Recall, and Hellraiser. And it was about a year ago when I realized that I really wanted to make a video on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I thought that I would want to do it before 2025 came to an end, and here we are with the final month of the year, and I finally got it made. I hope that you enjoyed it. I know that there are a lot of people in the world who have read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when they were kids, and so did I. But I really enjoyed rereading it as an adult this year, because it's a really well done novel. Yes, of course, it's for kids, but it's really enjoyable as an adult too. It's fantastical, weird, kind of dark, and it leaves a lasting impression. Roald Dahl, for all his many flaws, was an incredibly talented author. And it's not just Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that's great. There's about a dozen Roald Dahl books that are just awesome children's books. And if this does well, I would love to talk about more of them. Books like Matilda and the Witches really stood out to me as a kid, and I'd love to revisit them. And when I was in elementary school, I actually did a whole project and diorama based on James and the Giant Peach, complete with an actual peach at the top in the scene that recreated when the peach rolled down the hill and squashed his terrible ants. It's a vivid childhood memory for me, and so was reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when I was a kid. So it was a real joy to be able to dig into the making of this novel and its larger themes and meaning. Obviously, the Gene Wilder film adaptation is awesome, but I don't care all that much for the Johnny Depp Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or the recent Wonka prequel. They're fine, but I don't think they're going to age as well as the Gene Wilder version. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, your favorite Roald Dahl books, and what were some of your favorite novels when you were growing up as a kid. It's very interesting to me to see the types of novels that shaped every childhood, because there's a lot that shaped mine, and I'd love to continue talking about them in future videos. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons and members for their continued support, and if you'd like to be a patron or member, it's only $2 a month for early access to every video and exclusive reviews, with the exclusive review for December of 2025 chosen to be a review of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. So until next time, I hope that you're taking care of yourselves and letting a great book reshape your mind.